I flew to Miami without telling anyone. My daughter was dying alone in a hospital bed while her husband sat in an expensive restaurant laughing over wine with another woman. 48 hours later, he was standing in handcuffs, staring at me as if I had destroyed his life. He kept asking why I had done this to him. The truth was painfully simple. I hadn't destroyed anything. I had only uncovered what he had been hiding. If I had listened to his text messages telling me to stay home, my daughter probably wouldn't be alive today. Sometimes the most dangerous lies aren't screamed in your face. They are whispered calmly by someone who smiles while your family falls apart. My name is Margaret Ellis. I'm 58 years old, a retired elementary school principal from Columbus, Ohio. I've spent most of my life believing that if you treated people with kindness, they would eventually return it. That belief had carried me through raising my daughter after my husband passed away from a heart attack nearly 15 years earlier. Claire had been 17, then frightened but incredibly strong. She became my purpose, and I became hers. When she met Daniel Romano at a charity fundraiser in Chicago, I wanted to believe she had finally found someone worthy of her heart. He was polished, successful, and attentive, the kind of man who remembered birthdays without reminders and opened doors without making a performance of it. Or at least that's what I thought. They moved to Miami 3 years after their wedding when Daniel accepted a position as a regional director for a medical supply company. Claire worked remotely as a graphic designer, which made the move easy enough. We promised we'd see each other every few months, and for a while we actually did. Then something changed. The phone calls became shorter. Claire stopped sending pictures. Whenever I called in the evenings, Daniel usually answered first. She's resting, she's in the shower, she's been working all day. There was always an explanation. None of them sounded unreasonable, but together they felt rehearsed. I tried not to become one of those mothers who imagined problems where none existed. Claire was 32 years old. She deserved the space to build her own marriage without me looking over her shoulder. Still, there were moments that lingered. On Mother's Day, she forgot to call for the first time in her life. A week later, she apologized, blaming work deadlines. Her voice sounded tired, not busy tired. Then about 6 weeks before everything happened, I noticed something strange. Claire and I shared a small investment account that my late husband had opened for her before he died. Neither of us touched it often, but I received automatic alerts whenever money moved. 3 withdrawals appeared over 2 months. It was nothing illegal, nothing impossible, just unusual. When I asked Claire about them, she hesitated. "Oh, Daniel needed to move some money around for taxes," she said. The explanation came too quickly. Before I could ask anything else, Daniel's voice floated through the phone. "Honey, dinner's getting cold." Claire laughed softly. "I have to go, Mom." The call ended. I remember staring at my reflection in the kitchen window afterward. Something wasn't right, but I simply couldn't explain why. Then came Tuesday morning. It was raining outside and I had just poured coffee when my phone rang. I smiled before answering. Sweetheart, silence followed. Then weak, uneven breathing. "Mom." Her voice barely existed. "I'm here, A cough interrupted her. Metal clanged somewhere nearby, and a monitor beeped steadily in the background. Hospitals have sounds that become unmistakable once you've spent enough time inside one. I knew them immediately. "Claire, what's wrong? I'm sorry for." Her breathing became shallower. "Mom, The line went dead. I called back instantly, but there was no answer. It went straight to voicemail. I texted her but received nothing. I called Daniel and he declined the call. 30 seconds later, a text appeared from his number. "Claire's exhausted. She's getting some rest. Don't worry, please don't come. I'll take care of everything." I read it 3 times. The words themselves weren't alarming. It was what they ignored. If Claire was simply resting, why had I heard hospital monitors? Why had she sounded terrified? Why tell me not to come before I had even suggested it? For the first time in years, I didn't hesitate. I opened my laptop. The first flight to Miami left in less than 2 hours, and I booked it without thinking about the cost. While throwing clothes into a suitcase, I called my neighbor, Linda. "I need someone to water my plants." "Everything okay, Margaret?" "No." I zipped the suitcase. "I don't think it is." The airport blurred together, parking, security, boarding. Everything happened automatically while my mind replayed Claire's voice. "Mom, I'm sorry." "Sorry for what?" The question refused to leave me alone. Halfway through the flight, I texted Daniel again. "Which hospital?" There was no reply. 20 minutes later, Daniel answered me. Nothing. I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. By then, my stomach had tied itself into a hard knot. When the plane landed in Miami, the humidity hit me the moment the terminal doors opened. Normally I'd complain about the heat, but that night I barely noticed it. I rented the first available car and began calling hospitals one by one. The 4th one answered. "Yes, Mrs. Claire Romano is currently admitted." My hands tightened around the steering wheel. "I'm her mother. We've been trying to reach her. Emergency, contact her husband." Yes. Has he been there? A pause came over the line. I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't discuss that over the phone. That was answer enough. The drive felt endless. Traffic lights seemed designed specifically to torture people desperate to reach someone they loved. By the time I pulled into the hospital parking garage, it was almost 11 at night. Everything outside looked peaceful. Palm trees, warm air, bright lights reflecting off polished glass. Inside, the emergency floor smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee. A tired nurse looked up from the reception desk. My daughter is Claire Romano. Recognition crossed her face instantly. Not can I help you or who are you, but you must be her mother. Something inside me dropped. The nurse stood up. I've been hoping someone from her family would come. My mouth went dry. I am her family. She nodded gently. I know. She led me down a quiet hallway. No one spoke and every step echoed louder than the last. Finally, we stopped outside room 417. The blinds were half open. Before I stepped inside, I looked through the narrow window. Claire lay motionless beneath a thin white blanket. Her skin looked pale against the pillow, and dark circles framed her closed eyes. An IV dripped steadily into her arm. There was no husband, no visitors, no flowers, no overnight bag, nothing that suggested someone who loved her had been sitting beside her. It was just my little girl completely alone. For a few seconds I couldn't move. The woman lying in that hospital bed looked like my daughter, but she didn't look like the vibrant little girl who used to race barefoot across our backyard, or the confident young woman who had called me laughing after landing her first design contract. Claire had always carried herself with quiet strength. Now she seemed to disappear into the mattress, as though the illness had been slowly erasing her long before I ever boarded that flight. The nurse rested a gentle hand on my shoulder. You can go in. I nodded, though my legs felt strangely heavy. The room was almost silent, except for the steady rhythm of the heart monitor and the soft hiss of oxygen flowing through a tube beneath Claire's nose. Someone had left the television on with the volume muted. A cooking show played in the corner while my daughter fought to stay alive. I walked to her bedside and carefully took her hand. It was colder than I expected. Claire. Her eyelids didn't move. I swallowed hard. I'm here, sweetheart. There was no response. I sat down and held her hand anyway. After everything we'd survived together over the years, I wasn't about to leave her alone now. About 15 minutes later, a physician quietly entered the room. His badge identified him as Dr. Michael Patel. He offered a sympathetic smile before introducing himself. You must be Mrs. Ellis. I am. I'm glad you came. There was something about the way he said those words that immediately made me uneasy. He pulled a chair closer instead of remaining by the door. Doctors don't sit down unless the conversation matters. Your daughter is stable for the moment, he began carefully. She's responding to treatment, but she's been extremely dehydrated and physically exhausted. Her condition worsened significantly before she came to us. When was she admitted? Yesterday afternoon. I stared at him. Yesterday, he nodded. We attempted to contact her emergency contact multiple times. Daniel, yes, and he answered once. My pulse quickened. What did he say? The doctor hesitated, choosing his words carefully. He told our staff he was occupied with an important business dinner but would come if there was an emergency. I felt my jaw tighten. This isn't an emergency. We considered it serious enough to keep calling. Did he ever come? The doctor looked directly into my eyes. No. The answer landed with a strange calmness, not disbelief, not shock, just certainty. Every uneasy feeling I'd been pushing aside for months suddenly had a place to stand. I don't understand, I whispered. He knew she was here, yes. And he stayed away, I'm afraid so. Dr. Patel stood up. We're optimistic, she'll recover physically. She'll need rest, hydration, and close monitoring. If she wakes tonight, having you here will help. After he left, I remained beside Claire, watching the IV slowly drip one drop, then another. Time lost all meaning inside that room. Around 2 a.m, Claire stirred. Her fingers twitched inside mine. I leaned closer immediately. Claire. Her eyes opened only halfway. She seemed confused at first. Then she recognized me. Tears instantly gathered in the corners of her eyes. Mom. I'm here. You came. Of course I came. Her lips trembled. I thought. She stopped to catch her breath. I thought he told you not to. I don't care what he told me. She closed her eyes for a moment before whispering something so quietly, I almost missed it. Don't let him. What, take me home? Every muscle in my body went rigid. What do you mean? She tried to continue, but instead she began coughing violently. The nurse hurried in to check her oxygen levels. Claire became too exhausted to speak again, and within minutes she had fallen back asleep. But those 5 words echoed through my mind. Times don't let him take me home. Not "don't leave me," not "I'm scared." Specifically times him times specifically times home. The nurse adjusted Claire's blanket before quietly saying, "She's been asking if her mother was coming." My throat tightened. Why didn't anyone call me directly? We weren't allowed. I looked up. What do you mean? The emergency contact information instructed us to communicate only through her husband. Only through him. She nodded. It was written very clearly. I felt another piece of the puzzle shift into place. Someone had made sure information stopped entirely with Daniel. As dawn approached, I stepped into the hallway to clear my head. The night nurse from reception recognized me. She walked over carrying a paper cup of coffee. "You look like you could use this." I accepted it gratefully. "Thank you." She hesitated. "I probably shouldn't say this." My attention sharpened. "What? When we called your son-in-law yesterday?" She lowered her voice. "It didn't sound like he was at work. What did it sound like?" There was loud music. She frowned as if replaying the memory. People laughing, glasses clinking. I remember because another nurse joked that whoever he was with seemed to be having a better evening than we were. My stomach twisted. Did he say where he was? No, but he kept saying he couldn't leave because dinner had already been served. Dinner. While Claire was lying unconscious. The nurse looked uncomfortable. "I've worked emergency medicine for 18 years, she folded her arms. Family members panic over broken wrists. They race here for migraines. They come for stomach bugs. She glanced toward Claire's room. I've never understood someone skipping this. Neither had I. I returned to Claire's bedside and noticed her phone lying inside the bedside drawer. Its battery was nearly dead. I plugged it into the charger, and as the screen lit up, dozens of missed calls and unanswered messages appeared. Most were mine. Then I noticed something else. The location-sharing service Claire and I had activated years earlier for road trips and safety was still connected. Daniel had apparently never realized it. I hesitated, then I opened the family location map. A blue dot appeared, not at the hospital, not at their home. It rested beside the waterfront in downtown Miami. I enlarged the map. The name appeared immediately, La Perla Steakhouse, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants where reservations were often booked weeks in advance. I stared at the screen. Claire lay asleep only a few feet away. Her husband wasn't sitting beside her. He wasn't calling doctors. And he wasn't waiting anxiously for updates. He was eating filet mignon somewhere overlooking Biscayne Bay. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Daniel. "How's she doing?" No greeting, no concern, just 4 empty words. I typed back, "Where are you?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Nothing. 5 minutes later, another message arrived. "I'll stop by tomorrow." Tomorrow, as though visiting his hospitalized wife were just another appointment to fit between meetings. I looked down at Claire. Her breathing had become steadier, and the color had returned slightly to her cheeks. She deserved someone who fought for her, not someone scheduling her between dinner courses. I leaned over and kissed her forehead. "I'm going to be back soon." She didn't wake. I quietly asked the nurse to call me immediately, if anything changed, and she promised she would. 20 minutes later, I climbed into the rental car. The navigation estimated 18 minutes to La Perla Steakhouse. Rush hour traffic had already begun filling the streets, and somehow every red light felt personal. As I drove, I kept hoping I'd arrive and discover some reasonable explanation. Maybe Daniel had met an important client. Maybe the location was wrong. Maybe everything I'd begun to suspect would fall apart the moment I walked inside. Deep down, I already knew it wouldn't. Valet attendants hurried between luxury cars as I pulled into the restaurant entrance. The ocean shimmered beyond the terrace. Inside, soft jazz drifted through crystal chandeliers. Couples laughed over expensive wine, and waiters carried silver trays balanced effortlessly on one hand. I scanned the dining room. Then I saw him. Daniel sat near the windows wearing the navy suit Claire had bought him for their anniversary. Across from him sat an elegant blonde woman in a white dress. They were smiling. Champagne glasses rested between them. The waiter placed 2 perfectly cooked steaks on the table. Daniel reached across, touched her hand, and laughed. Then I heard him say the sentence that made every instinct inside me turn to ice. "After tonight, Claire won't be a problem anymore." He smiled confidently. For one brief second, every sound inside the restaurant disappeared. The conversations around me faded, the clinking glasses, the soft jazz drifting through hidden speakers, the ocean beyond the windows, it all dissolved into silence. All I could see was Daniel. He looked relaxed, comfortable. The same man who had texted me less than an hour earlier asking, "How's she doing now?" leaned back in his chair with a smile that belonged to someone celebrating, not worrying. The woman across from him laughed. She couldn't have been older than 35, perfect blonde hair, diamond earrings that caught the light every time she turned her head, and a fitted white dress that looked more expensive than most people's monthly mortgage. Payments. She reached across the table and touched Daniel's wrist. "You've been tense all week," she said. "I told you everything would work out." Daniel exhaled and picked up his wine. "It finally is." They clinked glasses. My pulse pounded in my ears. Every instinct told me to storm across the dining room and throw that glass into his face. Instead, I stopped myself. Anger would satisfy me for 30 seconds. Evidence could protect my daughter forever. I slowly stepped behind a decorative column overlooking their table. Years ago, when I was still the principal of Jefferson Elementary, I had learned something invaluable during difficult meetings with angry parents. The first person who lost control usually lost credibility. Not today. Today I needed patience. I lowered the brightness on my phone and pressed record. Their voices carried surprisingly well in the quiet corner of the restaurant. Vanessa smiled and asked, "When do you finally get to breathe?" Daniel laughed. "When this is over." "And Claire?" He shrugged. "She's exhausted. She's barely paying attention to anything anymore." Vanessa tilted her head. "She still doesn't suspect us," Daniel smirked. "No. She thinks I'm working late." They both laughed. I tightened my grip around the phone so hard my fingers hurt. A waiter arrived carrying another bottle of wine. After he left, Vanessa leaned forward. "I've been wondering. What happens with the house?" Daniel smiled. "The way people smile when discussing an investment. I keep it. And the insurance." He took another sip. "I've already spoken with the financial advisor." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "You plan everything." "You have to," he cut into his steak. "Otherwise people ask questions." She lowered her voice. "And her mother?" Daniel actually rolled his eyes. "Margaret, she's in Ohio. She worries too much, but she doesn't know anything." I felt something inside me become frighteningly calm. This wasn't simply an affair. This wasn't a husband making terrible choices. This man had already begun planning a future that didn't include my daughter. Vanessa glanced around before speaking again. "You're sure Claire won't fight you?" Daniel smiled without looking up. "She won't." The confidence in those two words chilled me more than anything else he'd said. Vanessa reached for his hand again. "I can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore." Daniel squeezed her fingers. "Neither can I." The recording continued. Neither of them noticed me, and neither of them seemed remotely concerned that Claire had spent the last 24 hours in a hospital bed. Finally, Vanessa asked the question I would remember for the rest of my life. "What if she gets better?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. He carefully folded his napkin, then he looked directly at Vanessa. "She won't be a problem." Exactly the same phrase I had heard when I first walked inside. Not "I hope she recovers," not "I should go see my wife." Simply, "She won't be a problem." I stopped recording. I already had enough. Any more would only make me sicker. I slipped the phone into my purse and walked toward their table. Neither of them noticed me until I stopped right beside Daniel. He looked up casually and then every bit of color drained from his face. "Margaret." His fork froze halfway to his mouth. For a moment he looked like a man who had seen a ghost. "You. What are you doing here?" I answered quietly. "I could ask you the same question." Vanessa looked between us. "Daniel." He stood up too quickly, nearly knocking over his chair. "Margaret, this isn't what it looks like." I almost laughed. "It's exactly what it looks like." Several nearby diners glanced toward us. I kept my voice low. I wasn't interested in making a scene. Daniel forced a smile. "I was just meeting a client." I looked at Vanessa. "So your clients hold hands during business dinners now?" Vanessa immediately withdrew her hand from the table. Daniel cleared his throat. "Let's talk outside. This isn't the place." "No," his polite expression cracked for the first time. "Margaret, my wife is sick." I stared at him. "Don't you dare call her your wife only because I'm standing here." His jaw tightened. "I've been checking on her. The hospital called you repeatedly." I was busy. "Busy," I repeated. "My daughter has spent the last day alone in intensive care." "You've been eating steak." A couple at the next table quietly stopped talking. The restaurant had become noticeably quieter. Daniel lowered his voice. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Vanessa finally spoke. "I think maybe I should." "Yes," I interrupted, "you should." She gathered her purse awkwardly. Daniel caught her wrist. "Stay." That single gesture told me everything. He wasn't worried about Claire. He was worried about losing control. I leaned slightly closer to him. "Claire woke up tonight." His eyes widened just enough for me to notice. "She asked for me." He remained silent. "Do you know what she said?" He swallowed and I watched his throat move. "Don't let him take me home." His expression changed only for an instant, but it changed. Fear. Not sadness, not guilt, fear. He recovered quickly. She's confused because of the medication. I nodded slowly. Maybe. I reached into my purse. For one brief moment his eyes followed my hand nervously. I wasn't reaching for a weapon, only my phone. I looked at the screen, then back at him. You've had quite an interesting dinner. What does that mean? It means I slipped the phone back into my purse. People should always be careful what they say in public. His breathing slowed. He understood maybe not everything, but enough. You recorded us. I smiled politely but didn't answer. He took one step toward me. Delete it. No. You don't know what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. Vanessa looked genuinely frightened now. Daniel. He ignored her completely. I said delete it. No. The firmness in my own voice surprised even me. Years of teaching children and managing difficult parents had taught me how to remain calm when someone else wanted a fight. Daniel stepped even closer. For the first time in all the years I'd known him, I saw genuine anger behind the polished businessman. Margaret, this can become very ugly. I looked directly into his eyes. It already has. Without another word, I turned and walked toward the exit. I expected him to follow, but he didn't, perhaps because too many people were watching, or perhaps because he hadn't yet decided how much I actually knew. The warm Miami air hit me as I stepped outside. Only then did I allow myself one long, shaky breath. I immediately forwarded the audio recording to 3 people, my attorney in Ohio, my longtime friend Robert Lawson, a retired homicide detective, and my own email. Then I typed one short message to Robert, call me as soon as you hear this. Something is very wrong. Before I reached my car, my phone vibrated. It was Robert. I listened to the first 2 minutes. His normally calm voice sounded unusually serious. Margaret, where are you? Going back to the hospital. I'm already leaving. Good. There was a pause. Don't confront him again. Why? Because if that recording is accurate, another silence followed. This isn't just an affair anymore. The drive back felt twice as long. Every traffic light seemed determined to delay me. When I finally rushed into Claire's room, she was still asleep. A nurse smiled reassuringly. She's stable. Relief washed over me. Then another voice spoke from behind Mrs. Ellis. I turned around. Dr. Patel stood in the hallway holding a thin medical chart. His expression had changed. The kindness was still there, but now it was mixed with heavy concern. I've been reviewing your daughter's records. He glanced toward Claire's room before lowering his voice. There's something about her medication history that doesn't make sense. Dr. Patel waited until we were several feet away from Claire's room before speaking again. The hallway was nearly empty. Dawn had fully broken outside, sending pale Florida sunlight through the tall windows overlooking the parking garage. Nurses moved quietly from room to room, their shoes barely making a sound against the polished floor. He opened Claire's chart. I've spent most of the night reviewing her records. I folded my arms. And there are major inconsistencies. My stomach tightened. What kind of inconsistencies? He pointed to several pages. Your daughter has lupus. I nodded. She's had it since she was 26. Exactly. Lupus patients usually manage well if they consistently take their medications and receive regular monitoring. He paused. But Claire's blood work doesn't match someone following that treatment. I stared at him. What are you saying? I'm saying she's missing medications. Missing them how? I don't know. He turned another page. Several prescriptions were never refilled. I frowned. That can't be right. We verified it this morning. He looked directly at me. Some of her essential medications haven't been picked up in nearly 6 weeks. I felt my pulse quicken. Daniel handles the pharmacy. I assumed as much. He told everyone she was taking everything exactly as prescribed. Dr. Patel nodded slowly. That's what concerns me. My mind raced through every conversation I'd had with Daniel during the past several months. She's tired because the medication changed. The doctor wants her resting more. She doesn't feel like talking today. Every explanation suddenly sounded different. Not because the words had changed, but because I finally understood who had been saying them. Dr. Patel closed the chart. I can't accuse anyone of wrongdoing, but medically he hesitated. Someone either failed to provide her medication or prevented her from taking it. The hallway suddenly felt colder. Could that explain how sick she became? Absolutely. If untreated long enough, lupus can attack multiple organs. He lowered his voice. Another week and this conversation might have been very different. I looked through the small window in Claire's door. She was still sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that the man she'd trusted with her life might have been quietly destroying it. What happens now? I asked. We continue treating her. He paused, and I recommend documenting everything. I already have. He studied my face. You suspect someone. I don't know what I suspect. That wasn't entirely true. I was simply afraid to say it aloud because once I admitted the possibility I couldn't take it back. Later that morning I met with the hospital's patient advocate who helped me obtain copies of Claire's recent admission paperwork. As I flipped through the documents, another disturbing detail appeared. Emergency contact Daniel Romano. Alternate contact, none. There wasn't even my phone number listed. I looked at the advocate. My daughter would never remove me. She nodded sympathetically. Changes were made electronically about 4 months ago. Can you tell who made them? I'm sorry, not without a legal request. 4 months. The same period when Claire had slowly stopped calling as often. The same period when the unusual withdrawals began. The same period when Daniel suddenly insisted on managing every detail of her medical care. A pattern was emerging, one deliberate decision after another. Around noon my phone rang. It was Robert Lawson. My old friend had spent 32 years investigating violent crimes before retiring from the Columbus Police Department. He wasn't dramatic and he didn't jump to conclusions. If Robert sounded worried, there was always a reason. I've listened to the recording 6 times, he said. So have I. What did your doctor say? I summarized everything. Silence followed. Finally, Robert spoke. Margaret, listen to me. Don't accuse Daniel of anything yet. I wasn't planning to. Good. Because if he's innocent, you'll destroy his life. And if he's guilty, his answer came immediately, then he'll destroy himself. Robert asked me to email him every document I collected. I'll have a former colleague look at the financial side, the bank records, everything. Especially those withdrawals you mentioned. Money usually tells the truth before people do. That afternoon Claire woke again. She looked slightly stronger than she had during the night, though exhaustion still covered her face. She smiled weakly when she saw me. You stayed. I told you I would. She squeezed my hand. I'm sorry. For what? For dragging you into this. You didn't. You called me and I chose to come. Tears filled her eyes. I almost didn't. What do you mean? She looked toward the closed door before answering. Daniel kept saying you worried too much. He said you needed peace. He told me, her voice cracked, that you were happier if I handled things myself. I felt a sharp ache settle in my chest. Claire, he said every time I called you, you became anxious for days. So I stopped calling as much. I couldn't speak. My daughter had spent months protecting me from a pain someone else had invented. She wiped her eyes carefully. I believed him. You have nothing to apologize for. She hesitated, then looked directly at me. Mom, when was the last time Daniel actually called you? I thought about it. Months. He always texted. Claire nodded slowly. He wouldn't let me answer sometimes. He said I needed to rest. She looked embarrassed. I know how that sounds. It sounds like the truth. She took a shaky breath. He handled my medications too. I asked him about them once. He told me insurance delayed everything. I gently brushed a strand of hair away from her forehead. The doctor says that's not true. She closed her eyes. I figured that out. When I started feeling worse, I kept asking why, and every answer was later. Everything would happen later, the refill, the appointment, the specialist, the recovery. Always later, never today. At 3 o'clock, my local attorney, Melissa Grant, arrived at the hospital. Robert had called her before I even knew he planned to. She reviewed the hospital paperwork carefully. The first thing we're doing, she said, is making sure no one removes Claire from this hospital without her written permission. Can Daniel do that? He could certainly try. Melissa immediately requested temporary restrictions through the hospital administration. Within an hour, security had been notified, no discharge, no transfer, and no access to confidential information without Claire's explicit approval. For the first time since landing in Miami, I felt like we had regained one small piece of control. Just after 6 that evening, the elevator doors opened. I recognized Daniel before he even stepped onto the floor. His expensive suit had been replaced with jeans and a casual button-down shirt. He carried flowers, too many flowers, the kind people bought when appearances mattered more than sincerity. He spotted me immediately. There you are, his smile looked practiced. I've been looking everywhere. I stood up. You finally found time. He ignored the remark. How's Claire, you tell me? He frowned. I've been worried sick. The lie came so naturally that it almost impressed me. You had 26 hours to visit. I had meetings. My wife understands my responsibilities. I took one slow step toward him. No, she understands your excuses. His smile disappeared. I don't want to argue. Neither do I. Then let me see my wife. Before I could answer, Melissa stepped beside me. I'm afraid that's not possible right now. Daniel blinked. And you are Melissa Grant, attorney for Claire Ellis Romano. His face changed instantly. I don't understand. You don't need to. He looked back at me. You hired a lawyer, I hired someone to protect my daughter. Daniel laughed once. This is ridiculous. I'm her husband. Melissa calmly handed him a document. Hospital administration has been notified. Any attempt to remove Mrs. Romano without her consent will be reported immediately. Daniel's jaw tightened. You can't keep me away from my own wife. Before Melissa could answer, two uniformed hospital security officers turned the corner. One of them addressed Daniel politely. Sir, we need you to remain in the visitor area unless staff escorts you. Daniel looked from the guards to Melissa, then to me. For the first time, he realized the situation was no longer under his control. His voice became colder. This isn't over. I met his stare without flinching. No, it isn't. As he slowly backed away, my phone vibrated. It was Robert. I answered immediately, his voice low. Margaret, what is it? We found where the missing money went. My heart skipped. And trust me, he said quietly, that's only the beginning. Robert called back less than 10 minutes later. I stepped into the quiet family waiting room before answering. My hands were trembling, though not from fear anymore. I had reached a point where every new piece of information simply fit into a puzzle that was already beginning to reveal its picture. What did you find? I asked. Robert didn't waste time. My friend pulled public financial records and cross-checked the withdrawals from Claire's investment account. The money never went toward taxes. I closed my eyes. I figured. It was transferred into a business account Daniel controls. Then from there, Robert paused. Large payments were made to a luxury condominium management company, high-end jewelry stores, and one travel agency. My heart sank. A travel agency. 2 first-class tickets. Destination Street, Lucia. I leaned against the wall. Daniel hadn't been preparing to save his marriage. He had been planning a vacation. Robert continued. The reservation was for Daniel Romano and Vanessa Hart, when next month. Claire might have been lying in a cemetery while her husband sipped cocktails on a Caribbean beach. The thought made my stomach turn. I forwarded everything to Melissa. There's more coming. I'll be ready. You'd better be. His voice became deadly serious. Margaret, if everything we're seeing is accurate, this investigation is about to become criminal. Within the hour, Melissa returned carrying another folder. She spread several documents across the small conference table inside the hospital. Robert's information checked out. She looked at me. We also found something else. What? Daniel recently increased Claire's life insurance policy. I stared at her. How much? $2 million. My mouth went dry. And he was the sole beneficiary. I slowly sat down. When about 5 months ago, exactly when everything had started changing. Melissa continued. He also added himself as financial power of attorney after claiming Claire's health was becoming unpredictable. I never heard about that. I doubt Claire fully understood what she signed. I remembered my daughter saying Daniel handled everything, appointments, medication, bills, insurance. She had trusted him, and he had quietly built an entire financial structure around her illness. Melissa closed the folder. I'm contacting the police. Detective Elena Ruiz arrived shortly before sunset. She was calm, direct, and experienced enough not to rush toward conclusions. She listened to my recording without interrupting, then she read Dr. Patel's report, and then she reviewed the financial documents. Finally, she looked at me. Mrs. Ellis, I'm not saying this proves attempted murder. She chose every word carefully, but it absolutely justifies opening a criminal investigation. She requested permission to interview Claire when Claire felt strong enough. Later that evening, Detective Ruiz spoke with her privately while I waited outside. The interview lasted nearly 40 minutes. When the detective emerged, her expression had hardened. What did she say? I can't discuss every detail, she paused, but your daughter confirmed that Daniel controlled nearly every aspect of her medical treatment. She looked toward Claire's room. She also told us she repeatedly asked about missing prescriptions, and he always had an excuse. The detective tucked her notebook beneath her arm. I've seen financial abuse before, and I've seen domestic coercion. What concerns me, she stopped, is how neatly everything overlaps. The following morning, the hospital security cameras provided another piece of the story. Daniel had never visited after bringing Claire to the emergency room. He signed the admission paperwork, stayed 14 minutes, walked out, and then drove directly to his office. From there, he went straight to La Perla Steakhouse. The timestamps matched perfectly with the hospital's unanswered phone calls. There was no misunderstanding, no scheduling conflict, and no emergency meeting. He simply chose to be somewhere else. Around noon, Vanessa Hart arrived at the police station for questioning. Detective Ruiz later summarized the interview for us. Vanessa insisted she believed Daniel and Claire were basically separated. She claimed Daniel had told her his wife wanted a quiet divorce. Then detectives showed her the hospital timeline. They showed her Claire's condition. Then they played part of my recording. Vanessa's confidence disappeared. By evening, she had voluntarily surrendered months of text messages. Those messages painted an ugly picture. Daniel repeatedly referred to Claire as the situation. He joked about starting over. He discussed selling the Miami house. He talked about the insurance money. Even if he never explicitly admitted a crime, his priorities were impossible to ignore. Claire improved a little each day. Color slowly returned to her face, and she smiled more often. One afternoon she looked out the hospital window and quietly said, "I thought nobody would believe me." I squeezed her hand. "I believe you. I should have left months ago. You leave when you're ready." She looked at me. I kept thinking marriage meant fighting harder. "It does," I smiled gently. "But not when you're the only one fighting." For the first time since I arrived in Miami, she laughed. It was soft and brief, but real. Exactly 48 hours after I walked into La Perla Steakhouse, Detective Ruiz returned. She wasn't alone. 2 uniformed officers accompanied her. "We're ready." Melissa nodded. "So are we." Daniel had been asked to come to the hospital under the pretense of discussing Claire's discharge plans. He arrived wearing another expensive suit and carrying yet another bouquet. Apparently appearances still mattered to him. He smiled when he entered the lobby. I knew she'd be coming home soon. No one answered. Detective Ruiz stepped forward. "Daniel Romano." He looked confused. "Yes, I'm Detective Elena Ruiz with the Miami-Dade Police. We need to speak with you regarding an ongoing criminal investigation." His smile disappeared. "I'm sorry," she continued calmly. "You are being detained pending charges related to financial exploitation, insurance fraud, obstruction of medical care, and additional offenses currently under investigation." "What? This is insane," he laughed nervously. "There must be some mistake." "There isn't one." One officer gently took the flowers from his hands and the other reached for his wrists. Daniel finally looked at me, his face completely losing its confidence. "You did this," his voice cracked. "You ruined my life." I walked toward him slowly. People in the lobby had stopped to watch doctors, visitors, patients. Everyone seemed frozen. I stopped only a few feet away. "No, Daniel," my voice remained calm. "You ruined your own life. You did it the day you left my daughter alone in that hospital. You did it every time you lied to her. You did it every time you chose money over the woman who trusted you." The officer secured the handcuffs and their metallic click echoed through the lobby. Daniel lowered his head. For the first time since I'd known him, he had nothing left to say. The officers led him outside and he never looked back. 3 months later, Claire returned home with me to Ohio while continuing her recovery. The divorce proceedings began shortly afterward. The criminal case moved slowly, as these cases often do, but the evidence continued growing. Claire started painting again. She laughed more and she slept through the night. One Saturday morning, we sat on the back porch watching cardinals gather near the bird feeder my husband had built years earlier. She wrapped both hands around a cup of coffee and smiled. "You know if you hadn't ignored his text." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. I reached across the table and held her hand. A mother's heart doesn't always know why, but sometimes it knows exactly when to get on a plane.